So picture this. It is July in Henderson, Nevada.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, exactly. The thermometer on your back patio reads a blistering, just absolute blistering 108 degrees.
Sounds about right for July.
Right. And you are standing in your air-conditioned kitchen holding a glass of ice water, and you look out your back window. And what do you see? If you are like half the homeowners in neighborhoods like Green Valley or Anthem, you are just staring out at this patch of crunchy brown despair.
Crunchy brown despair. That is, well, it's the perfect way to describe it.
It really is, because that patch of dirt used to be a lawn.
Right. And it captures the visceral reality of what so many people are looking at right now, you know?
Yeah.
Because maintaining a traditional yard in that environment, it isn't just difficult. It's a constant uphill battle against the fundamental geography of the region.
And today we are taking a deep dive into exactly how we fight that battle, or rather, I guess, how we are learning to stop fighting it and start adapting to it.
Yeah, adapting is the key word there.
Exactly. So we are going to unpack the science, the underlying economics, and the completely hidden civil engineering of modern artificial turf. Because looking at our sources today, it's basically a masterclass in how we adapt to extreme environments.
It really is. I mean, we are looking at a fundamental shift in strategy here.
Right. Because for decades, the approach in the Mojave Desert was to just, brute force the solution, just fight nature with endless sprinklers, fertilizers, and like sheer willpower.
Yeah, which is an exhausted strategy at this point. What we are seeing now is a pivot away from that brute force towards smart adaptation.
Which is an essential pivot, honestly.
You're sure?
Because the old definition of a lush green backyard in southern Nevada was essentially built on a geographical contradiction.
A total contradiction.
Yeah.
So whether you have a yard of your own or, whether you live in a desert climate or whether you just love a good deep dive into everyday engineering, there is something deeply fascinating here. How a simple household feature, literally the grass under your feet, is actually a complex technological marvel.
Oh, absolutely. But before we get to the biomimetics and the space-age polymers, we really have to look at why the traditional approach, just planting grass seeds and watering them, is failing so spectacularly.
Well, the failure is twofold, really. It's both ecologically unsustainable and financially draining.
Yeah, the numbers are wild.
They are. I mean, growing real grass in the Mojave Desert requires a staggering volume of water, far beyond what most people intuitively estimate. If we look at the data coming out the Southern Nevada Water Authority, or SNWA, the numbers are just jarring.
Okay, lay it on me.
A single square foot of traditional grass requires 55 gallons of water every single year just to survive.
Hey, wait, let's just do the math on that for a second, because 55 gallons for 1 square foot sounds, well, almost impossible.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Right. So if you have a modest, almost tiny suburban lawn, let's say just 500 square feet, which is essentially just a little patch in a backyard, you multiply 500 by 55. That means that little patch of green is guzzling 27,500 gallons of water annually.
It is an astronomical amount of water. You are essentially pouring a medium-sized swimming pool into a tiny patch of dirt every single year.
Wow.
Just to keep a non-native plant on life support, basically.
That is insane. It's like trying to grow a traditional lawn in Green Valley or Anthem is like trying to keep a snowman alive in a sauna,
That's a great way to put it.
You are just throwing resources at an impossible geographic reality. And it's not just the water itself, it's the cost of that water.
Yeah.
Henderson utilizes a tiered pricing structure, right?
Exactly. It isn't a flat rate where the 100th gallon costs the same as the first.
Right.
The tiered system means the more water you use, the significantly more you pay per gallon at the higher tiers.
So they are actively punishing you for using too much.
Yeah, the municipality actively penalizes high consumption to disincentivize exactly this kind of waste. You are not just paying a utility bill, you are paying a premium penalty for the luxury of defying the desert.
Okay, so if I'm a homeowner looking at my massive water bill, my first instinct might be to just, surrender.
Sure, throw in the towel.
Yeah, let the grass die, stop watering it entirely, and just have a yard full of bare dirt or gravel. But the sources point out that causes its own localized environmental crisis, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And that brings us to the heat island effect.
Okay, what is that exactly?
Well, if you just surrender and leave bare baking dirt or rock in your yard, that surface absorbs the relentless Mojave sun all day long. It acts like a giant thermal battery.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, as the sun goes down, it radiates all that stored heat back out into the environment. So it actually makes the ambient temperature around your home even hotter.
You're baking your own microclimate.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit. If bare dirt is a thermal battery, isn't replacing natural plants with a synthetic plastic material ecologically worse?
That is the big question.
Right. Because we've all stepped on a dark plastic toy or a plastic deck in the middle of summer, it feels like a literal frying pan. So how is swapping dirt for a giant sheet of plastic an ecological win? Wouldn't the plastic just cook in the desert sun and radiate even more heat than the dirt?
So that is a completely illogical assumption, and it's usually the very first objection people have when they start considering synthetic turf.
Yeah, it just feels counterintuitive.
But we have to look at this in the context of the macro-level water crisis. In a region where the Colorado River and Lake Mead are shrinking to historically low levels, water conservation have to be the primary driver of environmental policy.
The water is the bigger emergency.
Exactly. The region simply does not have the 27,500 gallons of water per yard to justify decorative grass. The water drain is a far more immediate threat than the localized heat of a yard.
So it's a matter of picking the lesser of two evils. We save the water, but we just have to live with a plastic frying pan in our backyard.
Not exactly. The whole plastic frying pan idea is based on really outdated technology. If we were talking about the shiny flat plastic from like a 1970s grandmother's patio.
Or that cheap miniature golf course carpet.
Right, exactly. If it was that stuff, yes, it would absolutely cook.
Yeah.
But modern turf is fundamentally different. It utilizes highly engineered materials and cooling technology to keep surface temperatures manageable.
Really?
Yeah. It actually performs vastly better in the heat than bare dirt, concrete, or decorative gravel.
Okay, well, if it's not just a sheet of green plastic, what actually is it? Because when I pictured artificial grass before reading this, I definitely pictured that abrasive, bright green outdoor carpet. But clearly this new material is playing by completely different rules.
Oh, totally different rules.
Yeah.
The guiding principle behind modern artificial turf is biomimicry.
Biomimicry.
Yeah. The engineers aren't just trying to make a surface that happens to be green. They are studying the biological structure of actual grass and attempting to mimic its complexity synthetically.
And this is where the psychology of it is so fascinating to me, because it looks real, specifically because it is engineered to be imperfect.
Exactly. It is not a monolithic uniform sheet.
Right. If you look closely at high-end turf, it features varied blade heights. It uses a mixture of olive hues and field green hues to create depth and shadow. But the detail that really caught my attention in the research is the thatch layer.
Oh, the thatch layer is a brilliant piece of engineering, mostly because it targets human perception.
How so?
Well, down at the root zone, beneath the tall green blades, manufacturers intentionally weave in a dense layer of textured, tan, curly fibers.
They intentionally manufacture dead grass.
Yes.
That is so crazy to me. They're putting fake, dying, tan organic matter into a brand new synthetic product.
Because human beings have an innate ability to spot the uncanny valley in nature.
Right, right.
We have been conditioned over millennia to know that a perfectly uniform, impossibly vibrant, flawlessly green lawn just does not exist in the real world.
Yeah, it looks alien.
Exactly. When we see one, our brains immediately flag it as synthetic. It makes us uncomfortable.
So we basically only accept the synthetic as real if it includes the flaws of nature.
Precisely. By engineering that simulated dead organic matter at the base, the manufacturers are tricking the eye. It looks real precisely because it isn't perfect. The tan fibers break up the visual uniformity.
That is incredible. But the biomimicry goes way beyond just the color palette, right? Because if we look at the actual geometry of the grass blades, we see some serious physics at play.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, cheap turf is just composed of flat plastic ribbons.
And flat plastic is the ultimate enemy in a desert environment for two distinct reasons, right?
Right. First, flat surfaces reflect sunlight directly back at the viewer. That creates a telltale shine or glare that immediately screams that the material is fake.
You can spot it from down the street.
Oh, yeah. And second, a flat surface area retains maximum heat. It absorbs the solar radiation directly.
But the high-end turf, the kind being installed in these professional residential projects, changes the microscopic shape of the blade itself. They don't use flat ribbons.
No, they extrude the polymer into complex geometric profiles.
Right, like some blades are shaped like a W, some are shaped like an S, or even an omega symbol. If you are standing on a modern synthetic lawn, you are actually standing on millions of tiny microscopic Ws.
And why do you think they choose those specific shapes?
Well,
It's not for structural support. It's entirely about light and heat displacement.
it makes me think of an analogy. Have you ever seen the inside of a professional recording studio?
Sure, yeah.
The walls are covered in those acoustic foam panels that look like egg cartons or, deep jagged
Right,
wedges.
to manage the acoustics of the room.
Exactly. If you have a room with perfectly flat drywall, the sound waves hit the wall and bounce straight back at you, creating a harsh echo. But if you put those jagged foam wedges on the wall, the sound waves hit the angles and diffuse.
Ah, I see where you're going.
Yeah, they scatter in a dozen different directions, breaking up the energy so the room sounds pure. When I look at the geometry of these WNS-shaped grass blades, they seem to be doing the exact same thing, but with light instead of sound.
That is a highly accurate analogy. It is all about wave diffusion. Just like the foam scatters sound waves to stop echoes, these complex blade geometries scatter light rays.
That makes so much
Yeah,
sense.
when sunlight hits the curve of the S blade or the valley of the W blade, the photons don't bounce straight back up into your eyes. They scatter in multiple directions.
Which entirely eliminates the plastic sheen or visual glare that plagues the cheap turf.
Exactly. And scattering the light isn't just a visual trick. It fundamentally changes the thermodynamics of the lawn.
Wow.
By diffusing the solar radiation and combining that geometry with what manufacturers call cool flow technology,
hmm
the surface temperature actually drops by 15 to 20% compared to flat blades,
So you are literally using the physical, microscopic shape of the material to fight the heat of the sun.
which is critical because we cannot underestimate the intensity of the Nevada sun.
Right.
It is frequently described by material scientists as a laser.
A laser.
Yeah, it is relentless, unfiltered UV radiation. If you put standard inferior plastic out in that environment, the UV rays will break down the chemical bonds of the plastic.
Just destroy it.
It will literally bleach it white, make it brittle, and it will turn to dust within 2 years.
Okay, so how does a high-end polymer survive a solar laser beam for 2 decades? I know the sources mentioned they use UV stabilizers, but I mean, if I spray UV protectant on my patio furniture, I still have to reapply it every single season.
Well, that's the difference between a topical treatment and molecular engineering.
Okay.
With professional-grade turf, the UV inhibitors aren't just sprayed on top as a protective coating after the grass is made. The UV stabilizers are integrated into the polymer mix at the molecular level, while the plastic is still a liquid.
Oh.
Yeah, before it is even extruded into blades.
So the protection is basically baked into the DNA of the grass.
Yes. The chemical structure of the polymer itself is altered to resist UV degradation.
That's incredible.
It means the turf strictly adheres to Synthetic Turf Council standards for UV resistance, ensuring it will hold its color, its structural integrity, and its flexibility for 15 to 20 years, even in 110-degree heat.
Okay, so we have this space-age, biomimetic, light-diffusing, molecularly stabilized material. It sounds completely indestructible, but the engineering data is very clear on one point.
What's that?
Having the best material in the world doesn't matter at all if you just unroll it over your backyard dirt.
Oh, not at all. The surface material is only half the equation. The battle against the desert isn't won on the surface. The battle is won or lost underground.
The installation process, which is where the true civil engineering happens. It's pointed out repeatedly in the guides that a bad installation, usually done by someone who just bought a roll of turf at a hardware store and throws it down, will fail completely in 6 months.
Almost guaranteed.
What is actually happening when a yard fails like that?
Well, a failure is catastrophic for the homeowner. Because the ground beneath the turf wasn't prepared correctly, it starts to sink, creating dangerous dips and valleys.
Yikes.
Yeah, massive wrinkles appear across the yard because the turf wasn't tensioned and secured properly. Hardy desert weeds punch right through the backing of the turf.
Because they're just so aggressive.
Right. Or, perhaps most severely, the yard starts to smell terrible because there is zero drainage, and rainwater or pet urine is just pooling directly under the surface, festering in the heat.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare. So to prevent that kind of scenario, professional installers treat the base layer of a yard exactly like they are pouring the foundation for a commercial building.
They have to.
There is a very specific, strict protocol. Let's walk through it because this is where the unseen magic really happens. Step 1 is excavation.
Right. And the foundational rule here is that you cannot build on top of native living soil.
Okay.
The protocol dictates digging down 3 to 4 inches and physically removing all the topsoil from the yard.
Why is that non-negotiable? I mean, if the ground is already flat, why dig it up just to fill it back in?
Because native soil is alive. It is full of organic matter, roots, microbes, decaying plant life.
Right.
If you lay a heavy synthetic barrier over the top of it, you suffocate that ecosystem. As that organic matter inevitably dies, breaks down, and decays over time, it shrinks in volume.
So the ground literally vanishes beneath the turf.
Precisely. If your turf is sitting on top of native soil, the ground will settle unevenly as the organic matter decays. Your perfectly flat, expensive lawn will slowly turn into a wavy, lumpy, hazardous mess. You have to remove the unpredictable organic variable entirely.
Wow. Okay, so you dig out 3 to 4 inches of dirt. Step 2 is the subbase. You have to replace that dirt with something structural. Installers fill that excavated area with a specific aggregate mix, usually a type 1 crushed rock.
Right.
And here's the detail that fascinated me. They mandate that this crushed rock must be compacted to exactly 90% density.
Yeah, the precision of that 90% number is the crux of the entire drainage system.
And this is where I really struggle to understand the logic. Why 90% compaction? Why not 100%? If I am building a foundation and I know I'm going to be walking on it, playing sports on it, and parking heavy cast iron patio furniture on it, I want that rock base pounded down to be as solid as a concrete slab so it never sinks. Why leave a 10% margin of error?
Because it isn't a margin of error, it's an engineered void.
An engineered void.
Yeah, this is where we see the delicate balance of soil mechanics at a microscopic level. If you bring in heavy machinery and compact that crushed rock to 100% density, you essentially turn the base into solid concrete.
Right.
All the jagged edges of the rocks are locked together so tightly that there is absolutely no space between them.
Which sounds incredibly stable.
It is stable, but it creates a massive functional problem.
Yeah.
You've just destroyed your drainage. Yeah. If water hits a surface, compacted to 100%, it has nowhere to go. It pools on top.
So if it rains or if a dog uses the yard, it just sits there.
Yes, exactly. By engineering the compaction to exactly 90%, you achieve two seemingly contradictory goals simultaneously.
Okay.
First, you create immense structural integrity, more than enough to support heavy foot traffic and patio furniture without dipping or rutting. But second, by stopping at 90%, you intentionally leave millions of microscopic voids between the individual pieces of crushed rock.
And those voids act like a sponge.
They act as a capillary system. Those tiny gaps allow rainwater or pet urine to percolate down through the synthetic turf, travel through the subbase, and safely drain into the native earth deep below the installation. It's a highly engineered sieve.
That is brilliant. Okay, so we have our 90% compacted draining subbase. Step 3 of the protocol is the barrier. Before the turf actually goes down, they lay down a commercial-grade geotextile weed barrier.
Yes.
And there's a strong emphasis in the guides that this is not the flimsy black plastic fabric you buy in a roll at the local gardening center.
Definitely not.
Perfect.
Because those cheap consumer fabrics are notorious for tearing easily, and more importantly, they often trap water.
Which ruins the drainage we just built.
Exactly. A commercial geotextile is engineered to do two things perfectly. It is strong enough to stop aggressive, drought-resistant desert root systems from pushing up from below and piercing the turf.
Right.
But crucially, it is highly breathable. It ensures that it doesn't interrupt that carefully engineered downward drainage we just talked about in subbase.
Got it. Okay, finally, step 4, the seams. Because unless your yard is perfectly rectangular and very small, the installers are going to have to join multiple massive, heavy rolls of turf together. And a bad seam looks like a Frankenstein scar running right across your yard.
Oh, absolutely. A visible seam breaks the psychological illusion immediately. The human eye is incredibly adept at detecting straight lines because perfect, endless straight lines rarely exist in the natural world.
That makes sense.
If you just cut two straight edges of turf and butt them together, it creates a highly visible, unnatural linear break that your brain flags instantly.
So how do you hide a seam between two giant rolls of plastic grass?
Professional installers use what is called an S-seaming technique. Instead of cutting straight lines, they cut the edges of both rolls in a matching, undulating S pattern.
It's like putting together two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. By making the seam a curve, the human eye has a much harder time tracking it. When you pair that curved seam with industrial-grade adhesives and carefully brush the fibers together, the connection becomes virtually invisible to the naked eye.
Wow.
The blades of grass from the two distinct rolls blend organically, completely hiding the fact that the yard is made of multiple pieces.
So if we step back, we have this incredible, permeable, perfectly seamed foundation. But because the drainage allows liquids to pass right through the system, the engineering doesn't stop there.
No, it doesn't.
We have to look at how this foundation is customized for the specific heavy-duty ways families actually use their yards. Because one size does not fit all.
Not at all. Customization is the hallmark of a successful modern turf installation. The subbase and the infill material.
Wait, what's the infill material?
Oh, that's the material brushed down into the grass blades to keep them standing up.
Got it.
Yeah, the subbase and the infill are completely modular. They have to be adapted depending on the primary use case.
Yeah.
And the most critical high-stakes example of this is homes with pets.
Right, because if you have a dog, a standard installation protocol is going to turn your backyard into a chemical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
In a standard install, they brush silica sand into the grass, right? The sand weighs the turf down and keeps those biomimetic blades standing upright. But if a dog urinates on standard silica sand, it is a disaster.
It becomes a toxic ammonia-scented hazard zone very quickly.
Yikes.
The issue with silica sand is that it is a mechanical trap. It absorbs the liquid urine, but it does absolutely nothing to neutralize the chemical compounds within it. It just holds onto the ammonia.
Just trapping it there.
Right. Then, when the intense Nevada sun hits that silica sand, it essentially bakes the ammonia, releasing intense, highly concentrated foul odors into the air.
So, if I have a dog, how do I avoid my yard smelling like a kennel in July?
The installation protocol for pet owners completely abandons standard silica sand. Instead, they swap it out for an organic, zeolite-based infill.
What exactly is zeolite?
Zeolite is a natural, highly porous volcanic mineral, and its chemistry is uniquely suited for this exact problem.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't just mechanically absorb the liquid like a sponge, the way silica sand does. Zeolite actively engages in a process called ion exchange.
Ion exchange. So it's fundamentally altering the chemistry of the urine.
Yes. When the ammonia molecules from the pet urine make physical contact with the zeolite mineral, the zeolite chemically binds to the odor-causing ions.
Wow.
It essentially swaps ions with the ammonia, trapping the volatile compounds within its own molecular structure and neutralizing the odor on contact.
It tracks the smell at the molecular level. It's not just masking it with a perfume. It's chemically disarming the ammonia.
Exactly. And to ensure this system works flawlessly, installers pair the zeolite infill with an edge-to-edge permeable backing on the turf itself.
Okay, what does the standard turf use?
Cheaper turf often just has drainage holes punched in the backing every few inches. That means urine has to travel horizontally across the backing to find a hole, which leaves residue.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. For pets, the protocol insists on a fully permeable backing so the liquids pass instantly, vertically into the zeolite and the subbase without pooling. Furthermore, the entire customized system is engineered to be antimicrobial and hypoallergenic.
You know, it really makes me think about customizing a vehicle. Customizing the turf infill is exactly like picking the right tires for a car.
How so?
Well, you wouldn't put slick, bald racing tires on a Jeep that you are taking off-roading in the mud. And you wouldn't put massive, heavy, knobby mud tires on a Ferrari meant for the track.
Right.
Similarly, you do not use silica sand, which is designed for weight and stability, in a yard with a golden retriever, where you desperately need zeolite for chemical odor control. You have to match the equipment to the terrain and the behavior.
That analogy holds up perfectly, especially when we look at the next customized terrain, putting greens.
Oh yeah. Henderson is famously a golf town.
It is. You have world-class courses dotting the landscape, and many homeowners want to bring that precise country club experience to their own backyard.
But a putting green requires a completely different methodology, right? I can't just take the tall, biomimetic, W-shaped grass we discussed earlier, drop a golf ball on it, and try to putt.
No, the ball would just sink into the tall fibers.
Right.
The physics of a golf roll require a totally different surface. For a putting green, the civil engineering of the subbase must be exponentially smoother than a standard yard.
Because every bump matters.
Exactly. Any minor imperfection, a single rock out of place in the crushed rock layer, will translate to an unfair break or bump on the surface of the green. And the material itself is fundamentally different. Instead of long, varied blades designed to scatter light, they use incredibly short, ultra-dense nylon or slit film polypropylene.
And here's where the silica sand makes a comeback.
Yes, it does.
They use incredibly fine silica sand for putting greens, but not just to weigh it down. They use it to adjust what golfers call the stimp.
Right. The stip meter is a device used to measure the speed of a golf green.
Right.
By meticulously adjusting the volume and the grain size of the fine silica sand that is brushed down into those dense nylon fibers, the installers can calibrate the friction of the surface.
That's
They
amazing.
can dictate exactly how fast and true the ball rolls, matching the speed of a professional course.
It's engineering the coefficient of friction. It really highlights how the turf isn't just a static surface. It is an active, functioning system tailored to human and animal behavior.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a really surprising use case that challenges our perception of the desert: winter sports facilities.
Yeah, we usually associate the Mojave Desert entirely with extreme summer heat. But the winters, while mild compared to the Midwest or the Northeast, present their own brutal logistical challenges for athletic fields.
Right, because in the winter, when the temperatures drop, the natural grass goes totally dormant. It stops growing, loses its color, and turns into this brittle, brown, fragile carpet.
And crucially, the soil underneath that dormant grass freezes or hardens significantly. The ground essentially turns into concrete.
Oh, wow.
Think about the physics of young athletes playing soccer, football, or lacrosse on dormant grass over hardened soil. The grass provides absolutely zero traction because it is dead and brittle, and more importantly, the hardened soil provides zero impact protection when those athletes inevitably fall.
It's incredibly dangerous.
It is a massive liability. By replacing those municipal or school fields with professional-grade sports turf, you are providing a highly engineered shock absorption system.
Right.
The synthetic fibers and the specialized rubberized or sand infills perform consistently, regardless of the thermal swings of the environment. The ground doesn't freeze in the same way, and the impact absorption remains constant.
So they can actually play.
Right? Athletes can train safely year-round, while the neighboring natural grass fields are locked behind field-closed signs to prevent injuries and to protect the fragile dormant roots.
So we have explored this incredibly resilient, perfectly customized biomimetic marvel. It survives UV lasers, it neutralizes ammonia, it drains perfectly, and it protects athletes. You invest in this system, the installation is flawless. It sounds like you can just walk away, sit on your patio, and never think about yard work ever again, right? You just enjoy your permanent oasis.
That is the dream, but it is fundamentally wrong.
No.
And it is perhaps the most dangerous misconception homeowners have when making this transition. It is referred to in the industry as the zero maintenance myth.
The zero maintenance myth. Okay, so the myth is that because the grass is synthetic, because it is essentially plastic and rock, it requires absolutely zero upkeep. But the reality is that it is low maintenance, not no maintenance.
Exactly. We have to look at the environmental reality of a backyard. Dust from the desert winds, organic debris like falling leaves, pollen, bird droppings, and certainly pet waste. None of that magically vanishes just because the grass underneath it isn't real.
True. It just sits there.
It settles on top of the turf.
Yeah.
And over time, as people walk on it, that organic material compacts down into the synthetic fibers in the infill.
And if you just ignore this, if you assume the plastic grass will just take care of itself, it undergoes chemical changes. That decaying organic matter can actually ruin the high-tech backing of the turf and create a breeding ground for bacteria.
It's simple biology and chemistry. When organic matter decays on top of a synthetic surface, it creates a layer of biofilm.
Biofilm.
Yeah. If left untreated, this biofilm essentially clogs the 90% compacted subbase we talked about. It degrades the drainage capacity. It causes the biomimicry fibers to mat down permanently, ruining the aesthetic, and it generates those strange, musty odors.
So what does this all actually mean for the homeowner? Am I just trading one set of exhausting weekend chores for another? I thought the whole point of this was to avoid the landscaping crews.
Right.
Do I really need to hire a professional just to maintain my fake grass? The instinct is to just grab a garden hose and spray it down, right?
Rinsing the turf with a hose is a common approach, but it's a myth that it solves the problem. Water helps wash away surface dust, but it doesn't cure a biofilm issue.
Oh.
You wouldn't clean a stained indoor carpet by just splashing a cup of water on it. You need extraction. It's a valid pushback to ask if you're just trading chores, but you have to weigh the scale of the maintenance.
Right, because I'm not mowing anymore.
Exactly. You are no longer mowing every single Saturday. You are no longer aerating the soil, applying toxic fertilizers, or battling broken sprinkler heads in 110-degree heat. What is actually required is strategic, periodic professional intervention, specifically winter maintenance.
Right. They talk about this crucial period before the spring BBQ season kicks off. The professionals come in with specialized equipment like heavy-duty power brooms and enzymatic cleaners.
Yeah, they do a deep clean.
They physically decompact the infill, stand the biomimetic fibers back up so they look new, and chemically neutralize any biofilm or bacteria that has formed. You are essentially paying for an annual tune-up to protect a five-figure investment so that it actually lasts the full 15 to 20 years it was engineered for.
And speaking of winter, there was a fascinating logistical secret about the turf industry that most people get completely backward. It is known as the golden window.
Yes.
Yeah.
The golden window. Most people assume that spring is the absolute best time to do yard renovations. You wait for the weather to warm up, the birds are singing, you get the itch to be outside, and you decide to rip out the dead grass.
Which is a huge mistake in this climate.
Right. Waiting until the temperatures creep back into the 80s in April or May is a rookie mistake in southern Nevada.
The prime time for turf replacement, the true golden window, is actually the dead of winter, December and January.
Which seems so counterintuitive. While the rest of the country is battling blizzards and frozen ground, the mild desert chill in Henderson offers the absolute perfect conditions for the heavy manual labor required for this.
Oh, absolutely.
Excavating 3 inches of topsoil is brutal work. Doing it in 60-degree weather is vastly superior to doing it in 95-degree weather. Plus, your natural Bermuda grass is already completely dormant in January. It looks like straw anyway, so it is the least painful time to rip it out aesthetically.
It is a brilliant point of logistical efficiency. You avoid the brutal summer heat, meaning the installation crews can work faster and safer. Your yard is fully prepped, settled, and pristine before the spring weather even arrives, so you don't lose a single day of prime patio season to construction.
You mentioned earlier that this is a 5-figure investment, and we talked about protecting it. Let's finally dive into the actual numbers, because all of this space-age technology, molecular UV stabilization, and civil engineering has to cost an absolute fortune, right?
It's definitely not cheap.
Let's break down the economics of adaptation. Why are residents rushing to do this if it is so expensive upfront?
Well, the upfront costs are undeniably higher than just throwing down a few rolls of sod or some cheap gravel. Professional installation, encompassing everything from the excavation to the zeolite infill, costs anywhere from $8 to $15 per square foot.
Okay.
The exact price depends on the quality of the turf you select and the complexity of the site prep required.
So for a very standard 1,000 square foot yard, you are looking at $8,000 to $15,000 just to get the project done. That is a serious chunk of change for any family.
It is a significant capital expenditure. But that number does not exist in a vacuum. You cannot look at the $15,000 price tag without factoring in the most powerful financial catalyst in this entire equation, the SNWA rebate.
The WaterSmart Landscapes rebate. This blew my mind.
It's a game changer.
The Southern Nevada Water Authority will actually pay you with a physical check to tear out your real grass. And it isn't just a token amount. The rebate currently pays up to $5 per square foot for replacing natural grass with desert-friendly landscaping or synthetic turf.
That is a massive, transformative subsidy.
Yeah.
If you are paying $10 a square foot for your installation, the rebate effectively covers half of your total project cost.
Wow.
The only critical caveat that homeowners miss is that you must apply for the rebate and be fully approved by the SNWA before you start removing a single blade of your natural grass.
Ah, so don't jump the gun.
Right. If you rip it out first, you forfeit the money.
Okay, so the upfront cost is heavily subsidized by the government. But the real magic, the reason people are jumping on this, happens when you calculate the ROI, the return on investment over time.
The financial timeline accelerates rapidly once the installation is complete. When you take the initial cost, subtract the massive rebate check, and then add in the total elimination of your staggering summer water bills, which we established penalize you at higher tiers, the savings pile up fast.
Because you aren't paying that penalty anymore.
Exactly. Then you add in the elimination of monthly maintenance fees. You are no longer buying mower gas, paying a landscaping crew, buying fertilizers, or paying for aeration services.
When you factor all of that in, the data shows that most Henderson homeowners break even on the entire project in just 3 to 4 years.
It's incredibly fast.
Let that sink in. A 3 to 4 year break-even point on a major home improvement project that is engineered to last 15 to 20 years. That is a massive financial win. After year 4, that eliminated water bill and those eliminated landscaping fees are just pure cash staying in your pocket every single month for the next decade and a half.
It makes complete, undeniable economic sense for the individual homeowner. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises a fascinating question. Why is the local government, the SNWA, giving away millions of dollars in subsidies to fund private yard renovations.
Because they literally have no other choice.
Exactly. The local government is actively subsidizing this private technological shift because the macro-level water crisis in the Mojave dictates it. The dropping water level in Lake Mead has been a persistent existential threat to the entire region.
It's all over the news.
Right. The city realizes that traditional lawns are a luxury the region can literally no longer afford. When you look at the infrastructure costs, it is actually cheaper for the city to pay you thousands of dollars to remove your grass than it is for them to source, treat, and pump the 27,500 gallons of water your tiny lawn would consume every single year.
It is a perfect alignment of private financial benefit and a public ecological necessity. It's rare that what is best for a homeowner's wallet is also exactly what is best for the regional environment. And the final economic cherry on top of all of this, curb appeal.
Oh, yeah. Real estate agents in Clark County now view drought-tolerant yards and high-end synthetic turf as a major selling point. It actively boosts property value.
Really?
Yeah, a decade ago, buyers might have seen artificial grass as a negative or a cheap compromise. Today, buyers see it as a premium, low-maintenance upgrade.
Because who wants to buy a house that comes with a built-in part-time job, pushing a lawnmower in 110-degree heat, along with a massive monthly water penalty?
Precisely. It transitions the yard from a liability into an asset.
We have covered so much ground today. We started by looking out a window at a patch of dead, crunchy dirt in the scorching Henderson sun, and from that patch of dirt, we discovered an entire hidden world of engineering.
We really did.
We unpacked the biomimetic psychology that uses fake dead thatch to trick our brains into accepting the synthetic. We explored the microscopic W-shaped geometry that diffuses solar photons to drop surface temperatures.
The wave diffusion.
Right. We dug down into the soil mechanics of a 90% compacted subbase to understand capillary drainage. We learned how swapping silica for volcanic zeolite neutralizes pet ammonia at a molecular level through ion exchange.
Which is a lifesaver for dog owners.
Absolutely. And we mapped out the local environmental economics that makes a 3-year ROI possible, subsidized by a city desperate to save its water supply.
It is a comprehensive portrait of how we adapt as a society. We are no longer stubbornly trying to force the Mojave Desert to look like a rainy meadow in Kentucky.
Which is what we were doing for decades.
Exactly. We are using advanced material science and smart civil engineering to create an environment that thrives precisely because it respects and adapts to the harsh realities of where it is located.
So, as you go about your day, take a look at your own surroundings. What elements of your environment, whether it's your yard, your home, or even your daily routines, are you endlessly fighting rather than smartly adapting to? Where are you pouring resources, time, and energy into a losing battle against nature when a shift in technology or a shifting perspective could offer a permanent oasis?
That is the ultimate takeaway. Strategic adaptation is always smarter and ultimately more rewarding than brute force.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly more philosophical thread to pull on. We talked earlier about that tan thatch layer, the fake dying grass intentionally woven into the bottom of the premium turf.
The biomimetic imperfection.
Right. Why is human psychology so deeply resistant to perfection? We possess the incredible technology to engineer a flawlessly green, immortal, perfectly uniform, zero-water lawn. We can make it utterly pristine, yet if we do, our brains reject it.
It's the uncanny valley effect.
Exactly. We insist on manufacturing fake imperfections, literally weaving synthetic death and decay into the product just to feel comfortable sitting in our own backyards. What does that say about our deep evolutionary need for nature to be just a little bit messy?
It suggests that deep down, we don't actually want a sterile plastic paradise. We just want a version of nature that we can manage, a version that doesn't constantly punish us.
A fascinating thought to chew on next time you are standing on a perfectly green lawn in the middle of the desert. Thank you for joining us as we unpacked the hidden science of the desert oasis. We will see you next time on The Deep Dive.